Next, we take a quick journey to PEAT's ROV tools. When you open Project Economic Analysis tool, or PEAT, under the menu tools, you should see a list of ROV tools. These are value-added tools. As of now, in version 2013B, there are only 4 tools listed, but over time, we will be adding additional capabilities and functionalities. So, for example, if you click on ROV probability distributions, you will be given the ROV probability distributions user interface as a standalone tool. You don't really need PEAT to run this tool at this point. But typically, click on apply global inputs to apply some of these global inputs such as minimum, most likely, maximum, and so forth, alpha, beta values. These are just global inputs, which means you enter some of these numbers up here one time, and everything gets ramified over 50 probability distributions. So, for example, if we scroll down to something along the lines of a binomial distribution, if you toss the coin 20 times, so binomial meaning heads or tails, probability of success is 50%. What's the probability of getting exactly 10 heads out of a 20 coin toss? There you can see the PDF, the probability density function is 17.62%. CDF, or cumulative probability density distribution function, is about 58.81%. So you can use this as a quick and dirty way of learning about probability distributions. It supports 12 languages that you can click on here. Level of precision, default is 4 decimals. You can increase that as well. So if you make a change on some of these numbers, for example, if I change this to like 11 or 11.5, just remember to click Run to do the update calculations in this case. You can also go to the Charts and Tables tab, and in here you have 3 different subtabs: Charts, Tables, and Compare Charts. So for example, if you want to see how a beta distribution actually looks like with an alpha of 2, beta of 5, you can click on Run Chart, and you can see using a 10,000 trial simulation, this is what the beta 2.5 distribution actually looks like. You can also create simulated distributions versus theoretical. Theoretical just looks at the PDF, the function itself, the mathematical function to create the distribution. Or you can click on Simulate Distribution and run the chart, which will take a couple extra seconds, and it will theoretically, run a Monte Carlo risk simulation of 10,000 trials and provide you a distribution, and you can compare it with the theoretical and see how closely resembling the distribution is. You can also create multiple charts. So for example, in the beta distribution, there are 2 inputs, alpha and beta, shape and scale. So for instance, if I were to change the alpha from, let's say, 2 all the way to 5, so which means with a step of 1, so what that means is it will test alpha of 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 5 different charts, 4 different charts, my apologies, and you see 4 different distributions in this case. Now if I change the decimals down to something that's a little bit more manageable, I can increase each of these, and I can move some of these items as well to the left, for example. And depending on what I want to do with the rest of the chart, I can make it bigger, smaller, and change the size, zoom in, zoom out, rotation, color of the charts, and so forth. So now you can actually see and compare multiple beta distributions in this case. You can also go to the table for probability tables. So for example, if I do a binomial distribution, again, trials of 20, probability of success is 0.5. And if I were to come out and do like a probability or cumulative probability distribution, I can change something like a random max, which is the number of successes from, say, 0 to 20 with a step of 1. And I can run the table in this case, and I can say, given this probability distribution, what's the probability of getting exactly 2 heads, which is this probability here, getting exactly 10 heads, 17.62%, and so forth. Now I can create multiple tables across X and Y axes. So if I were to change, let's say, probability of success, so from a 0.3 to say a 0.6, and I can run a table that looks like this. So across the top in this case, you can see it's column variable is probability of success of X, and the row variable would be the random X, in this case the number of successes in the getting heads. So you can generate tables like this very quickly using any distribution that you wish on here, up to 50 different distributions. And using this chart, if you recall, what we were able to do is create multiple charts of the same distribution. In this case was the beta distribution and so forth. You can conversely compare multiple charts at the same time. So for instance, I can compare, say, a beta distribution, the beta 2.5, with, let's say, a discrete uniform or exponential distribution, and I can keep adding as many as I want and run a couple of charts, and now I can compare what a exponential distribution looks like and the beta distribution actually looks like side by side. So in other words, this tool allows me the capability of comparing multiple different types of probability distributions. So you can delete or clear all in this case to take them off the list, if you will, or you can just select whatever you don't want and click delete, and you can clear all of these things if you wanted to. So the ROV probability distribution is a very handy tool, allows you to run with PDFs, CDFs, ICDFs, and look at probability of successes, failures of different events and so forth. So that's your ROV probability distributions. You've seen ROV decision trees under the strategy tree, if you recall, in a previous video, whereby we're able to see things along these lines of different probabilities, different strategies, and so forth for real options, for decision tree or dynamic decision trees. So I won't show you here on this video. So refer back to the previous video on strategic options to look at decision trees. There's also another tool called ROV Valuator. And ROV Valuator looks like this again, supports 12 languages. You can click on typically all categories and click on load sample inputs. It's always easy because it just pre-generates some previously set up numbers for you as an example. So you can click on any of these models. There are over 650 different models and functions and capabilities in the ROV Evaluator. Think of this ROV Evaluator as a calculator of sorts, but pretty advanced calculator with 650 functions. And we continually add additional capabilities to it. So all categories just list everything alphabetically. Or if you click on different categories like math functions, finance models, like for example, coefficient variation, internal rate of return, NPV, Sharpe ratios. You can do option models like closed form versus binomial, Black-Scholes models, and so forth. Additional, functionality like bond math or bond capabilities or debt, credit risk analysis, default probability, probably a default, market value of assets, hedging capabilities, exotic options. We've got a couple hundred of these exotic options capabilities from 2 assets, single asset, writer, extendable, generalized binomials to Asians, Bernoulli's binomials, all various different types of options capabilities. Financial ratios for business valuation purposes, forecasting capabilities, inventory analysis, PDFs, CDFs, probabilities, distribution analysis, put call models, queuing models, Six Sigma capabilities, process capabilities, sigmas, defect per million capabilities, value at risk, volatility, portfolio analysis, and so forth. So depending on which one you choose, for example, let me choose a fairly simple model, let's say a basic options model. If I choose a binomial American call option, notice that because I've clicked on load sample inputs, a set of sample inputs are loaded in for you. Stock price, strike price, and so forth. And all you need to do is click compute and obtain the result in this case. Again, a very simple way of doing calculation. Think of it as a calculator of sorts. There are certain models, for instance, that require a little bit of a series of cash flows, for example. So notice that there's a series of cash flows in this case. These are multiple series input parameters. So you can click on compute and notice that again, the value is generated for you. So you use space in between different inputs. So there are 6 cash flows in this case, and the timing year 1 all the way to year 6 for a specific bond price, and you can compute the value of the convexity of this specific bond. So very easy to use, very powerful, simple, and for example, you can also, let's say you are in a simple model like a binomial American call option, you can also click on chart and table, and what chart and table will do for you is put everything into different charts, into different scenario tables, okay, with a minimum, max, and step values for rows and for columns, generate charts for you at the same time. So some sensitivity charts and sensitivity tables that you can play with. But that concludes the simple, tool set that we have under ROV Project Economic Analysis tool. The other tool that is also available is Rov Compiler, and Rov Compiler is actually used to compile existing Excel models, and we'll see how that works in a minute. The other tool, like I mentioned, is Rov Compiler. So let me launch Rov Compiler and give you an illustration of what's going on. Rov Compiler is used to compile existing XLS or XLSX files, so in other words, regular Excel models that you create. Now, in your regular Excel models, for instance, let me open up a sample example model that I have on my desktop here. If I double click on it, you would see a sample model. It looks like this. It could be a small model, a complex model. Here we see a DCF, discounted cash flow return on investment model. We actually have some risk simulation embedded as well. With Risk Simulator, whereby you can actually run Monte Carlo risk simulations on these to obtain some simulated results. But nonetheless, just to illustrate what's happened, we have some cash flow models, and in the calculations you see some mathematical equations here, right? So E12 times E15 plus E13 and so forth. You may even have some additional functionalities in net present value, IRR. So the point is, your existing model tend to have intellectual property. It tends to have functionalities, equations, links, and so forth. Now, what you can do is you can take an existing Excel model like this and compile it. So convert an Excel file into an exe file, an executable file, whereby all of your IP, your intellectual property, will be safe. Nobody can see the equations, but yet the model is still fully functional. And also, it prevents unauthorized users from accessing the software, the executable now, because you can put licensing controls and password locks and so forth that are 128 to 256-bit encrypted. And also at the same time, you're preventing users from accidentally or intentionally by malice or without any forethought to break the model, accidentally delete a link or so. But in this case, by compiling it, nobody can go in there and mess around with your equations or your links. So here's your example model. I'll close out of that. It is an XLS file. So now I've launched our Rov Compiler. What I can do is just go through the list, if you will, under File Settings. I will open up something that I've already saved, a sample profile. So you can save these, your settings the way you want it. But let me just walk you through this. So we start with the first tab. It says Compile Single Excel File. So you just browse to the file that you want, so the XLS file, and then save the Excel file as an executable exe. So give it a name. In this case, I save it also to the desktop, and we give it a different name and call it with an exe. You can also compile multiple Excel files at the same time, but here we're just going to illustrate one compiling a single file. You can also compile any related XLAs or VBA files that's associated with this executable, with this XLS, so that everything will be part of the exe. If there is a specific worksheet where there are inputs and outputs that you care about, you may have a very big Excel model, for instance, and there are only a few critical input cells that you care about and a few output cells that you care about, and we can set that up as well. Those are the settings that you would do for PEAT when you're in PEAT and you're using the Rov compiled module. That's the functionality you would use. So you can also set general settings like version number, so that you can keep tabs of what version we're looking at, different language settings if you want to. Put a different icon. The default icon is our Rov compiler icon. You can create your own icon for that file, if you will, the compiled file. Put a little splash if you want to, like a bitmap that will splash up when the software or when the exe, the compiled exe opens up, so you can see who it's from, about people who actually developed it and so forth. End user license agreement, any type of copyright information that you want the user to have access to and see. You can now put in the security settings. If you want to allow the compiled exe executable to be saved as savable, or just as a calculator where you type in numbers, get the results, but you cannot save the inputs. If you want to protect also any VBA codes and macros as in the file itself, or apply some type of a simple password. So you can put in a little password and you will have to retype, of course. Or you can apply advanced licensing, so you can generate some type of encryption template or put in your own encryption template if you wish. So encryption template just means this is like a master key. As many digits as you wish. You can put in any weird like pound signs and so forth, different signs. What that does for you is that if you lose this master key, be very careful. If you lose this master key, you yourself would not be able to generate a license to access the encrypted file. So just be careful, when you save this. So you can go with a simple password or an advanced licensing capabilities. And also, if you do advanced licensing capabilities, you can default limit use capabilities. So you can do a default without somebody without a license can use it, let's say 3 times, and at the end of 3 times, person using it for the 4th time will need to have a license. Number of days, for example, or some expiration date. You can put a little date on here as you want to, such that after the date, the file cannot be used anymore unless they have a valid license. So that's just the default settings without licensing. So especially when you send it to somebody, let's say it's a trial version and so forth. You can also come in here and verify your settings. You can click on verify. It will check to tell you, there's some things that you've done, some things that you've not done. So, whether it's successful or there's some warning. In this case, it just says you've only enabled simple password. You haven't really done a more detail. So you can go through the list. Or you can come to a compile project and try to compile the software. Just click on compile. It will compile the model. Or you can come to licensing of the project. So once you've compiled the exe, generated an executable file, what you can now do is provide licenses for end users, for people who actually need access to the exe. You can create permanent licenses, extended trial licenses, number of days, number of users, and so forth. Just make sure that your encryption template is set up correctly, otherwise it will not work. Or you can also have the ability to put in an optional hardware ID. A hardware ID just says, when somebody installs the software onto the computer, every computer has a unique hardware ID where we take 4 or 5 of your hardware components, like your hard drive, your motherboard ID, serial numbers, and so forth, to generate a unique hardware ID. So if you put in a hardware ID here, whenever you generate a license, in this case, what happens is if you click on generate key, this is the license key that you will email you can copy it and put it into an email. And you can send to whoever is using the exe file. The person will just paste it in and will be licensed either permanently or on an extended basis. So a very powerful license protection in this case. So what you can do now is when you're done, click on compile. It will compile the file. I won't walk you through it. It takes about anywhere between half a minute to a minute to actually run a compile. And once it's compiled, it will be an exe file. In this case, example rov compile exe. And notice I have the default icon on here. So if I double click on this on the desktop, what it does is it launches Excel. And I intentionally use Excel 2010 and 2013 to illustrate that it's compatible with both versions. Now notice that it looks exactly like what you saw previously. This is exactly like the previous Excel file. The difference now is this is an exe model. And so you notice that when I select this net present value, notice that up here in the formula bar is a number, in this case a result. All these are results. So your equations are actually gone. So total revenues, remember it was a multiplication sum. Now it becomes a number in this case. However, if I type in a different input and if I hit enter, notice what happens. All the values change. So let me try that again to like say $15. Notice all the numbers miraculously change automatically without having any equations in here. So literally a user cannot go in there and try to overwrite this. Okay, it will bring it back to the original value. Notice I typed in some bad numbers, accidentally overwritten the model. It will go in there and kick my numbers out and put back the correct value, because that cell itself, the total revenues, is a computed value. The only difference is this is now compiled. You cannot see the equations here. So your model is actually safe. You prevent users from breaking the model, but at the same time your intellectual property is also safe. So notice that all your equations here are gone. You can't really see it anymore, but at the same time you can and you should be able to run simulations. You can do any type of modifications or calculations to your model. So it looks like Excel, smells like Excel, works like Excel, but is really not Excel, because now you have the capability of encryption. And the encryption in this case, you can put in password licensing protections. You can allow people to save the file, not save the file, security settings, and so forth. So you have all that type of capability. And at the same time also, if you put in any type of input ranges and output ranges to the Excel model before you compile, what happens is you can use PEAT to run a compiled module. All right, so we'll see that in a separate video, and you see how we can actually run an ROV compiled model within PEAT itself as well. So very powerful capabilities to protect your IP.